Back in 2016, where Trump was initially running to be president, surprisingly, there were a lot of Italians going, "Hey, America, we've been through this before. We know this type of individual because we've elected them before, and he ran the country uh, well for quite some time." And that individual was, of course, Silvio Berlusconi. Well, I can't pronounce his first name now. But yeah, Berlusconi, I think that's how you say it, was, he was a rich, almost media mogul type individual. I think he owned like a couple of football teams as well, but a very, very wealthy individual who, just like Trump, one day decided, I'm going to go into politics. Seemingly out of nowhere, walked into politics, and then, of course, as we'll see in a moment, just went from scandal after scandal after scandal. And even those scandals did not seem to hurt his popularity with the voting public. Indeed, it took a long, long, long time after having all these scandals. It seemed that finally the the millionth scandal was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm sure there will be Italians who will probably explain more in more detail in the comments how that sort of more came about, and maybe how that all changed in sort of Italian politics. But I want to go through this thread that an Italian recently wrote, or at least I saw right on Twitter, about Berlusconi, because I think this does help to explain that, yes, Berlusconi is exactly what Italy was for Italy, what Donald Trump is to the US. And I think this will certainly help explain things a lot more. But I know, first of all, this isn't the first time a lot of people have said this. A lot of people have made this comparison before, and I really do agree with it. I really do, as we'll see throughout this comparison in a moment. But before we do get on to that Twitter thread, please do remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course, down below there's the Patreon page, there's a Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So here we go onto this post from a suspiciously fluffy fella. So, I am an Italian and I lived through the Berlusconi era. There's Berlusconi era. And in a lot of ways, Berlusconi was to Italy what Trump is to the USA. If you want to know what happened, look at Italy over 20 years ago. Like Trump, Berlusconi was an entrepreneur who decided to enter politics on his own agenda. He was misunderstood and underestimated by his enemies and had a lot of trouble with justice, but nevertheless, guaranteed unbelievable support from the people. And that is really it. He was such a bombastic individual, just like Trump is. And people have talked about, you look at Ron DeSantis, who I think if Trump had not run in this election, DeSantis would have won. But here's the thing, people would not vote for, new Trump when they can have classic Trump, that's on offer still. So, DeSantis, it was just not his time. He should have never have ran in that race. But he ignored advice, thinking, I can win. I can be, I can take the mantle from Donald Trump. I can be the new Trump. It'll all be, DeSantism, not Trumpism, that we'll be talking about. But he was, arrogant enough, and I think big-headed enough to really believe that. And of course, at the RNC, very recently, we saw him go and bend the knee. And unfortunately, even someone like Nikki Haley, we've also now seen going to bend the knee as well. I think that's kind of disappointing that a lot of these people who are, never Trumpers, very, very much occasionally will bend the knee for one reason and one reason only: they want the power. So, back onto this. So, Berlusconi was investigated and often tried on many different subjects, including money, money laundering, mafia affiliation, corruption, and entertaining himself with underage prostitutes. You name it. But these setbacks were never. These setbacks with justice never ever eroded the political support he had. Never. And that still surprises me to this day because it's the same thing with Trump. But you also look at, what many people would say was the UK version of Trump, Boris Johnson. And I think, maybe COVID was the big scandal that he couldn't, brush off. And certainly the Chris Pincher stuff as well. Something else that his really was for many of the Conservative MPs was really the thing for them that, we can't, justify standing for this guy anymore. We can't protect him. That I think, sort of made them finally throw him to the wolves. Um, you know, it's just one of those things. I really don't understand how they do have such a support when you see all these things that completely dog them. Same for Trump, same for Berlusconi, same for Boris Johnson as well. There were a lot of scandals, following Boris Johnson into number 10. Uh, you know, we might think, why on earth? But I think it has a lot to do with personality. I really do. Um, and that, I think, honestly, sometimes is the killer because you don't often see these big personalities in politics. And when they do get a modicum of power or they rise to the top because, that they're this big personality. But when they get power, it doesn't tend to go very well. So, two reasons for that, he explains. First of all, owning half of the mainstream TV channels let him build his own narrative as a victim of biased justice. And this was to communicate so down to earth. This earned him the sympathy of many people who saw others, not him, as old, corrupt politicians. And that was something, Berlusconi certainly had in spades. Like I say, when you own, you know, half of the mainstream news channels, well, yeah, you can absolutely set your own narrative on that, and he absolutely, just as it said there, absolutely did for that. But Trump obviously owns Truth Social. Fox News, even though he doesn't own Fox News, very, very much on his side. There's a whole, army of pro Trump Republican, YouTube channels out there as well that will also give him, free airtime over anything that he says. So, yeah, a lot of, not a one-to-one, but there is a lot of similarities. Berlusconi was always able to portray himself now as external to politics due to his private businesses in TV and football. Thus, every time he got investigated or he then tried to blame the corrupt politicians and the leftist justices who all wanted to rid themselves of him. Note that once this game finally started, it then became a life or death thing. Berlusconi was then forced to remain in politics to avoid jail, to need to govern, to make laws to beneficial to himself and his business. There was then no other option for him. Trump is now in this very same situation. Exactly. If you see Trump get in this time, he is absolutely going to do this to avoid jail. He's going to probably end up pardoning himself. That will cause constitutional crises. Absolutely. But hey, when you've got the Supreme Court pretty much on your side, that's, a guarantee on that. He hijacked the right wing for over 20 years and then losing his grip on power only when his old age and other huge sex scandal then drove large parts of the voters away. But here's the most interesting thing. Even in his golden age, people rarely actually admit voting for Berlusconi. Elections in Italy are fair. There's no questioning it and no risk of rigging. But during the early years and later years too, apparently nobody voted for Berlusconi. You ask your friends, families, co-workers, relatives, and neighbors, nobody says, I'm a Berlusconi supporter. Yet he had over 25% of the votes. Miraculous, that, isn't it? Yeah. The silent voter. And bear in mind, there's a lot of people worried about the next election in America of the silent Trump voters, those who will say never admit to voting for Trump openly, but when it comes to the ballot box, how many of those are really out there? We don't know, but I think this battle in a lot of the key swing states is going to be how many independents we can, Biden can swing over to his side, and so far, that does look to be something very much massively in his favor. So continuing with this now meant that people were ashamed of him and ashamed for voting for him. Yet they voted for him. A liar, yes. A con man, yes. A mafia man, maybe. Are you voting for him? No. Well, yes, I will, but I will never tell a soul. Why and how did this happen? Berlusconi portrayed himself as a successful man, a self-made one, a friend to the common people, a victim of political bullying, a victim of biased justice, and not a politician. And people loved him for this. His adversaries were never able to understand or even mimic his communication. So where am I going with all this? I don't really know. I just wanted to tell you. But if you wanted to understand Trump, look at Berlusconi. If you think that a con man, convict, and a serial liar cannot win elections, then you're in for a nasty surprise. People will vote for him regardless. I have to say, I agree. I agree. It's a really uncomfortable fact, but you saw the amount of support Trump had during the primaries. A large chunk of the Republican Party is still in his pocket, but just because you've got the Republican Party in your pocket does not mean you have the rest of the American voting public in your pocket. And I think maybe there's a lot of amnesia that people have about the Trump years and about how he acted, and I think like that. And trust me, if Trump does somehow win, I think you're going to have a very, very short honeymoon, because we've seen people like JD Vance, Project 2025. There's a ton of really worrying stuff that they're going to come after. Watch. I think it's the interview with the current speaker where for the Republicans. I can't remember his name now. But he's talking about the fact, the reporter asked him, "Oh, well, you seem to have changed your stance on abortion, letting it go to the states. Well, what about all those blue states that are legalizing abortion?" And he refuses to really answer the question, and that is very, very telling. That if they ever had the opportunity to go for a full, complete abortion ban, they absolutely would do. That is of no doubt. Bear in mind that they absolutely would do on that. And then finally, and the cherry on top, Berlusconi himself was once attacked and left with a very bloodied face. He sported a very large bandage and earned additional support. Everything you are going through, we, or shall we say the Italians, have seen it all before. There's a lot of he's right on there. I think he's very right, and I think any Italians watching this as well will, I think, probably agree with a lot of that stuff, and probably even tell us more about Berlusconi and all the other stuff that went on during that time as well. But I do agree with a lot of that. I really do agree with a lot of that, and especially the comment that, oh, people won't vote for a con man, convict, etc. Well, the Italians voted for Berlusconi en masse, even though a lot of them in public will not admit it. But when they went to the ballot box, they certainly did vote for him. Regardless of all the scandals, etc., that happened, they seemed to vote for him quite a number of times. So, as always, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, as always, do remember to click on the like and the share button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.